Thank you very much. It is a very emotional day for me. 20 years ago, day by day, the Berlin Wall fell. But it did not fall like the rain falls. A historic event does not happen just like nature happens. It was made by people. People made the Berlin Wall fall, and I do not refer to the member of the Politburo of the former Communist Party of East Germany who in a press conference said that the wall was open, but I do refer to the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of East Germans who in 1989 went to the streets to protest against their government because they wanted to live the way we live. We in West Germany, you in America. They wanted freedom. They wanted that for us, we think is self-evident, but it is not. And it was denied to so many millions of people, not only in East Germany, but also you can see all those flags in all those countries and countries which had been made Soviet republics. And they did that even though in the West, I remember it quite well because in the 80s, I was a student, just like these young men and women are students today. I remember very well how some so-called intellectuals in the West was talking about the socialist experiment and talking about cold warriors. Like if you were anti-communist, that was sort of a bad word. In the museum here, I read something very interesting Ronald Reagan had said, and he said it actually also in his famous speech in front of the Berlin Wall, that nations don't mistrust each other because they are armed because they mistrust each other. And there were very good reasons to mistrust the Soviet Union, because just as the general has just said, during the time of its existence, the Soviet Union has only brought misery and despair among its own people, the people of Russia, but also among all the peoples of the countries it conquered. And there is, the part which was the former GDR, the former East Germany, had formerly been inhabited by 20 million people, more or less. After the existence of the separation of Germany, about 3 million of them, between 3 and 4, left the GDR for the West, because it was possible to get from the East to the West via Berlin. Berlin, which was occupied by the 4 occupying powers, was still open and people could just relatively freely pass. So in 1961, East Germany created the wall, and thus hindering its people from getting out. Now there's another very famous speech made by an American president in Berlin. That was President Kennedy in 1963, 2 years after the construction of the wall, where he said the famous words, "Ich bin ein Berliner." But he also said something which I think is still true today, as we think or sometimes discuss about the state of our own democracy. He said, our democracy may not be perfect, but we never had to build a wall to fence our people in. And I would also remember something which I think is especially important on that day. Why did West Berlin remain an island of freedom in a sea of communist oppression? In 1948, 3 years after the end of the war, the Soviet Union tried to get the Western Allies out of West Berlin, and it closed the routes, the land access to West Berlin. West Berlin was just like an island, so the Soviet Union thought that if they closed the road access for the Western Allies, then West Berlin would just fall into their hands. And it was America which decided that this must not be allowed to happen. And the greatest humanitarian relief effort of all times was started, which was the Berlin Airlift. And 2 days ago, I spoke on the phone with one of the pilots who participated in this airlift. He is Colonel Gail Halvorsen. He will be 90 years old next year. And we had thinking of he was coming to Washington because our chancellor gave a speech in front of Congress, and he should be one of the guests. And I was talking with him on the phone, and that was very emotional to me because he showed me how one single person can really become a hero in transforming the life of an entire nation. While all these flights come in every 2 minutes, there was one plane landing for a year and a half in 1948-49. He noticed that a lot of children in West Berlin were very, sad, and they had gone through the horrors of war, and of course they were the children of the former enemies, Colonel Halvorsen thought, but then on the other hand they were children and they had certainly not to do anything with it, so he gave them chocolate. And they were so glad, and that overwhelmed him so much that the next time he landed, he threw chocolate out of the window of his plane on little parachutes made by himself from handkerchiefs. And he did this every time he landed in Berlin, and the press reported in that, and and then other pilots also started to do that, and that is actually the reason why they call these planes candy bombers. So actually he was the one who invented the candy bomber, and it is, you can read this in all German history books, and it is definitely the truth that by this action he profoundly transformed the West German and the West Berlinian opinion towards America. You know, it's the former enemy, one has to say, 3 years earlier only. So saved by America once, West Berlin remained an island of freedom, and West Berlin always remained the sting in the flesh of the communist system. So they had to build the wall to keep their people in. And when I was a student, many people sort of had arranged themselves with the situation. But President Reagan was one of those who had not. And who did not fear to be called a warmonger or an anti-communist, because he was very firm in his beliefs. And also in the museum you can read that freedom of speech means that you have the freedom to say what you think, even if you're the only one to think so. So he continuously stressed the importance of freedom, and he therefore, doing that, he knew that he was being heard also in the East, and he knew that he was giving hope to the East. And actually the German ambassador wrote a letter to the college, which I would like to read, because I think it resumes quite well the role of Ronald Reagan. It says, "Dear Dr. Arnold, 20 years ago, as the result of the peaceful revolution of people who took to the streets in East Germany, the Berlin Wall, a stark symbol of the Cold War, political oppression and freedom denied, came down, clearing the path to German unity. President Ronald Reagan played a key role in the effort to achieve a peaceful end to the Cold War and the division of Germany. In his famous 1987 speech before Berlin's iconic Brandenburg Gate, President Reagan memorably called on Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev to make the city whole again. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." His passionate appeal for freedom and human rights resonated around the world and encouraged East Germans when their spirits were low. The German people will always remember Ronald Reagan as a great political leader who helped lay the groundwork for the reunification of a democratic Germany. Sincerely, Klaus Schariot, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany. Thank you very much.